a lot of times when we are in these situations, whether we're, building a business, a career, a fitness, whatever it might be, we have these long-term goals. We're in our education, trying to pursue higher education, whatever it is. It's like these things sort of pop up and get in our way, but it's almost like it is like that's part of the process. I've always looked at it as, getting from point A to point B, yes, that is the main goal. Let's say you're driving 1,000 miles. Well, on that 1,000-mile trip, when you get to the very end of that trip, if you're going through all these red lights and whatever, these curves and everything else, you're going to be a much better driver than you were when you started at point A. And it's almost like, to be honest with you, man, it's almost like, in a way, that's kind of the whole purpose.
I'm Dwayne Morton, and I'm a former international basketball player. And I like to say that first because I accomplished my dream, and there's so many people out there who have not accomplished their dream. But really, my accomplishments came off of the basketball court. In 2006, I was diagnosed with rare blood cancer, and for 18 and a half years, I fought that. And as I was dealing with that, I went through a situation where I was a bystander of a police shooting, and so I ended up having a near-death experience with it, and was dealing with PTSD and survivor's guilt. And then on March 8th, I ended up finding out I was misdiagnosed. So what I did is I just chose how to respond. And that's how I became a resilience integrity coach, a published author, an inspirational speaker, and just teaching the lessons that I've learned throughout those challenges and sharing them with everyone. And so that's really me right now in a nutshell.
Yeah, man, there's a lot going on there. I think this is the first time I've ever heard, I think you said resilience integrity coach. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
Yeah, so this is something I was just a resilience coach, but then I realized that there's so many coaches out there that were kind of bringing kind of a negative vibe. And I believe in doing everything with integrity, and I've lived my life like that. So I felt like that was just another additive that I could bring to the table to kind of set me apart from everyone else. And so that's the reason why it's a resilience integrity coach. It's not a resilience and integrity coach, or an integrity coach that also just went through some resilience stuff. I wanted both, and I think that's really important, is to be able to be myself as much as possible, and to show why these challenges are to teach the other people lessons and help them get through whatever their situation is.
So what do you if like when you're coaching, what do you kind of focus on, like with resilience integrity?
Yeah, so well, most people who go to a resilience or integrity coach, Cody, they're usually lacking in one of the two or both. And a
Okay.
lot of people who lack integrity, I show them how much better and more free life is when you're able to do stuff with the lights on or the lights off. And that's with people watching you or people not watching you.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people, they change up their business practices. They change up their life because, hey, no one's watching, I can get away with it. But what they really don't understand is it's them that they have to go through that guilt process, that shame process, that inner child process. And so that's what I do. I bring that into play to show them that what you're doing is you're getting by with that person, but you're setting yourself up for failure to yourself. And I hate the word failure, but it's you're setting yourself up to be a bad example for yourself later on, because then you're like, oh, well, I got away with this time, then I can go ahead and get away with it this time. When if you just did the right thing the whole entire time, which everyone is pretty sure of what they would want someone else to do to them in a particular situation. So that's what I do.
Right.
I teach them. And I have these little guidelines and things like that I kind of just teach them and be like, well, how would that feel if you did the same thing to someone else? And then how would you feel if someone else did to you? If those things don't balance out and they're the same, then that's when we have to go and dive down a little deeper.
Yeah, no, I got you. And I think too, and I talk about this a lot on the podcast, that self-confidence is built from basically trusting yourself, keeping promises to yourself, I think building that integrity with yourself is basically what self-confidence is. And I don't think there's another way to do that other than to have that solid relationship with yourself. Like you're talking about, if somebody like does a certain thing or does not do a certain thing because of an outside source, well, that outside source is always going to influence who you are, and you're never going to feel truly confident with yourself. But if you flip that, and if you do the thing because it's something that you think that you should do or you have to do or whatever, you're disciplined enough to do it, it completely flips the whole script. And so I think to me, that's what integrity means. I mean, yeah, integrity is like honesty and stuff, but like having integrity with yourself, I think that's where, to me, that's where it comes in. Is sort of
Yeah.
having that
So
relationship that you can like be that person basically for yourself.
absolutely. And so I'm a strong believer in karma, and what you put out in the world is usually what you get back. And so I think that's another part of it, is when you realize that like whatever I put out, like I'm gonna receive that. I'm a big believer. It's in the Bible. Like I'm in Jim Rohn's mentor tree, and Jim talks about it. Um, Jim mentored my mentor, Melvin Turner Sr., and Melvin Turner Sr. mentored Jim Rohn in public speaking. And the reason I bring that up is like one of the big things Jim Rohn talks about is like the ask and receive part.
Mm.
It's reciprocal. And if there's a lot of us that give, and we don't receive. And there's people who just take, and they don't give. And so there has to be a balance of that.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. So you were talking about like the resilience and the resilience integrity. So we kind of like the integrity is kind of like having that conversation, that relationship with yourself. What about resilience? Like, where does that come in?
Man,
Like, because
resilience is. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, to me, resilience is like, I guess it depends on the context, but it can mean, many different things. So it's like it would be a person who has like a goal and they're kind of going towards that goal and they stay sort of focused and dedicated and motivated towards that goal. That's a form of resilience, but also too, like not being affected by things. I guess that maybe they're external. I mean, there's all kinds of different definitions, but um, for your coaching, what do you think that you focus on with that resilience part?
I focus on both, actually. I focus on resilience from just like the quote about the stonecutter, about just being determined and sitting there smacking the rock and to get your go. Like that's being resilient too. But also
Mhm.
sometimes we have to be adaptable and being resilient. It takes a different type of mindset to get knocked down and to get back up. Like
Mm.
everyone thinks that like is just a given, but it's not. You have to actually want to get back up. Like it takes energy. It's the same thing as when you talk about laziness. I think laziness is really just we're contemplating how much work it takes to get those results. In resilience, let's just look at like these successful business people who quit right before that business goes bananas and it does really well and people find the visibility or find that the product's really well. They end up selling it to someone else who has the visibility and then shows off the great product, and that business booms. I mean, you can look at like with Amazon buying Zappos, like those type of things. Like Zappos was pretty much, they felt like they hit the ceiling. But when Amazon bought Zappos, then it was like, oh, it's a whole different level. Those people just decided, hey, I want to get my payout. Or they decided, hey, we think the ship's done, like there's no
Mm.
more. Where someone who's resilient is like, I see this project going here and it's not there. So I'm willing to put more fuel in the fire to go. And that's what I do. I like to say it from this standard. I like to say the analogy of two lighters. I don't know if you've heard this before, but if you take a lighter and you dump it in water, you can't flick it and you can't start the light. Like it won't flame. But what it is like you can take someone who has that lit flame, come back to it, touch it, and both flames come on. That's what I
Mm.
do. I relight people's flame, their inner flame, not just their that flame. It's the inner flame, and that's what the resilience coaching does for them.
Okay. It's crazy. We're talking about this. You were talking about the companies. I think you mentioned Amazon earlier.
Yeah.
So there was and this the source for this is CNN. There was Starbucks was going to close like 400 stores earlier this year, or maybe later last year. They're going to close 400 stores because of like increased competition, people working from home, that kind of thing. And one thing that I saw when I sort of read that, what I immediately thought about was like adaptability. Like we have to be able to adapt, especially like as entrepreneurs, as business owners. You know, I mean, you think about the classic Blockbuster story where they didn't see the curve coming, or they didn't see what was coming, and Netflix kind of, took Netflix was really on the tip of the spear, I guess, as far as the first successful streaming company. But had Blockbuster kind of saw that and got in front of that and sort of shifted things, maybe they would be one of the streamers. Maybe they would be up there with Hulu and whatever else. But I think it's that adaptability, that being able to adapt. Now, Starbucks is a $1 billion corporation. They can shut down 400 stores and probably be completely okay. But I think if I had to imagine, the reason they're doing that is because it's going to optimize the other, 10,000 stores or whatever it is that they have. But I mean, I just think that, that adaptability, and I mean, it's all at scale too. Like 400 stores to them might be one project to a normal person. You know what I mean? Like just like closing that off. But anyway, it's just adaptability. I think we have to be able to adapt to sort of, if it's business, maybe it's the market, it's the circumstances, and that doesn't mean change the goal. That just means change the path that you take to get to the goal.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up. So, and I'll give this to the listeners. They go up to showuptowin.com. I have a PDF this is from that. It's called Dwayne's Daily Plan of Attack, and it's the 4 things that I do every day. Like I intentionally do this. And so the first one is gratitude. I wake up the day and I just say, thank you, God, for giving me the day. There's so many other people that don't get that. And I think with my story, I understand that to even a depth that some others don't. The second one's self-care. And however you want to define self-care is fine. Whether it's reading, whether it's stretching. I stretched for all the time that I was diagnosed. And then the third one is going to be movement. And that's just where you take a runner's mentality approach. I'm running through the day. If I focus on the past, I'm going to be depressed. But if you ever ran backwards, you're not going to go anywhere very fast, and you're also going to get off direction. Same thing. If I'm so focused on the goal and I'm focused on the direction of that, I'm going to get off direction. But more importantly, I'm going to cause myself anxiety. So when they really say the present is a gift, the present truly is a gift. Whenever I run, I'm only looking 15, 20 feet in front of me. And I'm looking for potholes. And so then it's going to bring us to step 4, and that's adaptability, Cody. And so in a car, when we drive and we see a pothole, we don't just sit there and hold our hands straight and just say, oh God, like, I hope I don't hit this pothole. But that's what we do in our life every day. Or some people do. They just sit there and hold straight. And there's a huge, huge pothole. And they think that they won't get the same damage that they would get if they just swerve or move and be adaptable, right? You can actually, and I like to put it this way, Cody, unexpected bills, people passing away, things happening, that is life. You have to be adaptable to life. And that was the thing that helped me when I went through the shooting, when I went through the diagnosis. I was at least as adaptable as possible as I could be. Yes, did it shake me to the core? Absolutely. But I also had to swerve and try to keep my direction of where I was going. And sometimes I did a great job of it. Sometimes I didn't. And I was very depressed through it. But you have to be able to say, if I do not want the end result to be me hitting the center of the pothole, I have to swerve and I have to do something. And I have to be adaptable. Adaptable is one of the biggest things I feel out of those 4 things. I think adaptable is probably one of the things that people say they do the most and they don't.
Yeah. You mentioned, I was laughing because you were talking about the pothole. Some people's response is just to hit it and just say, oops, hit the curb, hit the pothole, hit the stick, whatever, and just oops. But I mean, it's also too, man, that I see your analogy and I see where you're going with that. And I think that being able to see the pothole and the pothole just appearing, right up under you are sort of 2 different things. I think being able to maybe prepare or anticipate the worst is a little bit different from like those obstacles that come up out of nowhere, but it's still sort of the same framework as far as how we maneuver around it. I've talked before on here about, in other spaces, about, so there's a Stoic sort of, I don't know if you'd say a method or philosophy, where they would not expect, not manifest the negative outcome, but sort of, maybe just visualize it, because what that does is it allows you to plan for how something could go wrong. I mean, a lot of times we hear about like visualize success, visualize the outcome that you want, visualize, positivity, all this stuff. Well, that's great. And I mean, to a certain degree, I do believe in manifestation. I believe in prayer a lot more. But like the thing is, if you're only if you're only visualizing and focused on that success, you are completely oblivious to what can make you fail along that path. And so I think Marcus Aurelius was sort of on the forefront of this. I think that when we visualize or maybe prepare for the things that can make us fail, that's much more powerful than just visualizing success just by itself. So like to use your analogy, these potholes, if we can kind of, look at the road and just imagine, okay, if a pothole appears right here, what would I do? If it doesn't, then that's fine. You're just going to go straight anyways. But if it appears, do I have a plan? Do I have a back, whatever it is? And so I think that's a really important point for people to be aware of, is that like you have to be, I don't want to say aware, because that I don't want it to seem like we're talking about just assuming or expecting the worst, but we have to, if we prepare for it, I think that's going to get us much closer to success than just visualizing success alone.
Yeah, I mean, so I like to call it being aware, being aware. Like it's another step. It's the same thing as like how me and you right now are sharing presence. Okay, like, and this is gonna sound kind of woo woo, very spiritual, and that's fine. Like, but I've also went through a near death experience. Like this isn't the way that I feel like has been best for me. Is I enjoy sharing presence. I'm not here with expectations because I'm so intentionally and so present right now. I hear my phone going off right now. Like I can hear it, and I don't care. I'm not in my mind thinking, who's calling me? Is this because I have a meeting later on? No, I'm intentionally setting presence and sharing presence with you. Yeah, this is a distraction with the phone, right? But it's still, I'm still able to take that as a distraction, realize it, and still stay focused in this moment. There's so many people that do not do that. And it's the awareness part of just being aware. Like I'm aware of my breath. I'm aware of my heartbeat when I put my hand on my heart. Like those type of things. And that's also part of my program, Cody, like is to be that intentional, to be that present, and to notice the small stuff, how abundant things are, how things are way more in our favor than it is against us. And I think that when you look at those type of things, that's when you can be as adaptable as what we're talking about. Because guess what? All of these things are working in our favor. If we're driving a car, and I'll use this again, and there's a red light come on, and it stops me, I'm not sitting there cussing at it like I would have 20 years ago and been like, why did you stop me from driving faster? Like trying to get to my location. Instead, I'm saying, I'm really grateful for this red light because guess what? Probably could have stopped me from having a car accident. It could have stopped me from this. And then I leave it at that. And I just stay in that moment of gratitude. And I think when people realize that you can do that and be aware of that gratitude, life is a lot more friendly to you. Life is a lot better also. And I think that's another aspect of some of the things that I teach, in my Show Up to Win program, is just the concept of gratitude that we kind of take for granted, that we just don't, unless it's being taught to us or it's something that we've learned, we're not thinking about it because we're thinking about all the other things.
Yeah. Yeah. And to go back to your analogy too, talking about the red lights, and you said you could be irritated or you could be grateful for it. I think one thing to really be aware of in that situation is that like you just have to understand that those red lights, those potholes, people cutting you off, I mean, that's part of the drive. If you're going to get in that car and if you're going to drive point A to point B, those things are just part of the road that you're going to drive on. And I think a lot of times when we are in these situations, whether we're, building a business, a career, a fitness, whatever it might be, we have these long-term goals. We're in our education, trying to pursue higher education, whatever it is. It's like these things sort of pop up and get in our way, it seems like. But it's almost like that's part of the process. Like that's part of, in this case, the drive, those potholes, those obstacles. And so to me, I've always looked at it as I mean, getting from point A to point B, yes, that is the main goal. But like in this case, your analogy, let's say you're driving 1,000 miles. Well, on that 1,000 mile trip, when you get to the very end of that trip, if you're going through all these red lights and whatever, these curves and everything else, you're going to be a much better driver than you were when you started at point A. And it's almost like, to be honest with you, man, it's almost like in a way that's kind of the whole purpose. Because then once you do that, yeah, you got to point B, you got to the goal, but now you're a better driver. So now you can make another drive. Now you can go to another goal. And then once you get to that point C, you're even a better driver. And then point D, and then it just kind of goes on and on. And so I think, a lot of times we don't really, we do get so sort of focused on the goal, and I do appreciate that. I appreciate the dedication that we have towards that. But it's like, I think we should be aware of too, that like throughout that journey, throughout that drive or whatever it happens to be, like we're going to become better, either business people, drivers, teachers, whatever it might be. We're going to become better through that process. And I think that's one thing that when you talk about being resilient, going back to our conversation earlier, I think resilience, especially because there's a lot of talk about entrepreneurship on this podcast and, career advancement. I think that resilience is an absolute necessary trait for entrepreneurs. And I think that is one way that you do, that you stay resilient, is to just understand that that's part of the journey. You hear the phrase that climb the mountain for the climb, not the view, because that's the kind of thing I had this conversation with somebody a couple episodes ago, like the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. The extrinsic stuff is, if it's external, that's not sustainable. Like that's not like, when you hit these potholes, these red lights and stuff, it's not going to take very many of those for you to just quit and back off that drive. But that intrinsic stuff, if it comes from inside of you, that's where, when you hit these things, that's where that resilience can really show, because you're driven by something that's internal, and it's not something external that could be taken away.
Right. Well, so like when I brought up the lighter, that's why I said inner flame. That's why I mentioned inner flame rather than mention just the flame, because I can sit there and hold a flame and motivate people, but motivation only lasts for 15 minutes, maybe 2 weeks if it's really good motivation. But it has to do something with the inner part. When the inner flame, that's when true transformation really happens. And that's what I'm able to bring, is true transformation. It's not something that I just like say, hey, guess what? I read this in a book and, I think that I agree with this. No, man, I lived it. I lived it. I have a handicap parking tag that I showed to someone the other day. Like those type of things, like I really truly lived it. And if I can do it, I know you can too. Now, are you going to have to do some tweaks? Yes, absolutely. When I played basketball and I was getting ready to go overseas, I played with some really good players, and I had a mentor who helped me along. And guess what? That took my basketball ability to a whole nother level. It's the same thing with being a coach. Whether it's in fitness, whether it's in business, entrepreneurship, whether it's whatever. I believe coaching and mentorship is one of the most important steps, except begin. You have to say, I want to begin in anything. I want to begin. I want to be a basketball player. I want to be a podcaster. Those type of things, right? But when you say, I want to, you're declaring it. You are taking and you're making a commitment. And that commitment is what's based on whatever you want. If you want to be an expert, there's, put 1,000 hours into it. But I think with entrepreneurship, I was very fortunate, Cody. My parents had a small business. I watched them build it since I was 4. I saw the challenges so much. I seen it from the good side. I seen it from the bad side. I saw the positive effects. I saw the negative effects. I see people that try to take advantage of them. I saw the people that took advantage of them. I saw family members that took advantage of them. And I sat there and I just said, when I decide to do a business, I'm doing this differently. And the reason I'm doing this differently is because I've learned this information. And I think that's another part of entrepreneurship is I don't believe in failure in entrepreneurship. I believe it's all lessons. And when you're able to take it into that type of standard and you realize that like, hey, if I go bankrupt, guess what? I still know how to get back there. That's another part. And that's one of the biggest lessons I learned was even if your business is not successful, it does not mean that it wasn't a success. because if you learn something, and when you decide to make another business, guess what? You're not going to fall back on that mistake.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I want to shift gears here just for a second. I see that poster behind you. It says "Become Bulletproof," and then it's got, so for those just listening, it's got a basketball with sort of a bullet hole. Looks like a bullet hole through it. What's up with that? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so it's an oxymoron, man. The bullet didn't hit me in that truck. The truck took the bullet. But what people just did not understand, I wanted something to take an impact and explain, hey, yeah, the bullet actually hit me that day. Like, I was driving the truck, the bullet hit the truck, which is an extension of myself. So, but it took away my innocence, it took away parts of my soul. But I knew that God protected me that day. And so that's what it is it's called the bounce back blueprint, become bulletproof. And that's how I became bulletproof. That's how I have a bulletproof mindset. That basketball is identity for me. I had to take
Yeah.
that bullet so I could share the lessons of that situation, so for other people to learn it. But I had to take the bullet. I had to lose. I lost that day. Like, I lost in some different ways. I didn't lose my life, but what I did was I found my purpose, and my purpose was to inspire others to take the lessons that I got. So my purpose is to facilitate that lesson, not me hold on and say, oh, I'm too scared to like tell this lesson about this very tragic day where an officer got tragically murdered by by a criminal who was detained by the police. And it's I'm a very small part of that story, Cody. And for me, it's always been one of those things of, how much do I want to talk about this? Because then I get cornered into, are you pro police? You anti police? Are you anti gun? Are you pro gun? Like all those things, right? Those are agendas. I'm not a part of an agenda. Okay. I'm not wanting to be a part of an agenda. I want to share the lesson that I learned. So if someone else, that was another thing too, is these things that happened in my experience weren't decisions of mine. I take ownership of everything that I could of them to just allow me to say, okay, I own all of this. But ultimately, none of these were choices or decisions. But I dealt with the consequences. I'm dealing with the consequences every day. And so another thing about my mindset is this book dropped on the 3rd anniversary of the shooting on purpose, because I knew the power of mindset. It was a negative day to me. I wanted to make it the most positive day that I could. I've always wanted to be an author as a kid. So I dropped my book. I became an author the day of one of the most tragic events that for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and see what I like about this, sort of tie this all into the conversation, is this is a really good example of adaptability, because I think we talked about this on our pre-call, but Inky Johnson, for those who don't know, was a college football player, and his story is that he was going to make a tackle. And I think it's, if I remember correctly, the right arm, his right shoulder. I think I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, the subclavian artery, I think it's what it's called. It's something similar to that. In his shoulder ruptured, and so now, his right arm, I think it is paralyzed. And the doctors told him that he would never use that arm again, and he said, something along the lines of, "No disrespect, I'll use this arm for the rest, every day for the rest of my life." And he does that through speaking to people, kind of in the same conversations we're having right now. And so yeah, I think both of those are actually two good examples of adaptability. And so you sort of took that and made a story about it. And I think that's the beautiful part, because sometimes we have to play the hand we're dealt like it's the hand we want. Sometimes I think that when these things happen, and this even brings us back to the resilience part of it, and I guess maybe even the integrity too, because it's like, if you had this thing happen to you and it wasn't enough to sort of throw you off track. I mean, maybe it did temporarily. Maybe the path is not the exact same, but I think now, and I don't know, maybe you can share, maybe now the path is more, what would you say, more impactful, more aligned after this sort
More,
of situation?
yeah, I would say more part of servanthood. It's purposeful, but it's a
Mm,
purposeful servanthood. It's not Cody. I was told I was a great speaker when I was 20 years old. My response was, "No, I'm a basketball player." Like, I remember it plain as day, and that was to a
Mhm.
really good speaker. I've spoken in front of 1,000 people. Did not want any part of this, but I knew that these things happened to me for a purpose, and I would be doing such a disservice to take these and just say, "Well, I'm just gonna set on them because I just don't want to be out in the spotlight." I'm not a spotlight
Mm.
dude. I don't want to be in the spotlight. Like, that is not my. I'm learning to be adaptable, and I'm
Mhm.
learning to live in purpose. So the spotlight doesn't scare the holy crap out of me, and that's fine. I'm very well aware of it. But it's not.
So
This is not what Dwayne like sat down and put a goal and said, "I want to be in on 120 podcasts in 2025." No, did not think that that was going to be on um my life achievement. But what I wanted was, I wanted to inspire people. And to do that, I have to be very uncomfortable. I'm in my learning curve. Like,
mm,
they talk about being comfortable and you talk about being uncomfortable. But there's a learning curve in between. And that's what I'm doing is I'm not comfortable and I'm not uncomfortable. I'm learning how to be more comfortable in the uncomfortable stage. And then it expands.
mm. So I'm curious, you talk about speaking, talking about like being nervous in these environments, which a lot of people, public speaking for a lot of people is like a number one fear. Um, do you think, like, if you're talking about these subjects, do you find it, I don't want to say easy, maybe easier to speak like that versus if you were talking about something that you didn't really resonate with, didn't really care about, somebody asked you to, hey, go give a presentation on something that weren't really passionate about. Do you can you see the difference? Because the reason I'm asking is that I think when and you mentioned purpose, which I think is a really good way to phrase it, to a word to use, when we're sort of operating in that, it's like, we're fueled by something almost larger than ourselves. Like, we're fueled from something that sort of overrides at least a portion of that fear, maybe not all of it. But I've heard this sort of situation from other people in different spaces, about the same issue, or the same
Yeah.
concept.
So for me is I feel I'm divinely protected. So I'm not nervous
Mm,
at all. Like, um, it is a it is being chosen to do something. And maybe you're not chosen to do something that you felt like you wanted, but you're falling in love with it as you do it.
mm,
That's the best way to explain it. But then also, I've talked to speakers and they're like, if you're not nervous, you're not doing something right. And I'm like, I don't believe that. I just believe that things get taken care of. And I've never been nervous. Like, basketball, never been nervous. Like, am I anxious about something? Yeah, sure. Like, I'm wanting to play well or vice versa. But as far as like nerves, no, I think that that's just part of like my DNA. I think that's part of who I am. So for me to share or to explain that experience differently is I don't get nervous. Like, so if you put me in front of talking in front of the White House, okay, like, give me like, is it going to be something I want to talk about? Then it's going to be more passionate. It's going to be way more expressive because guess what? I actually give a damn about it. If I don't, then yeah, I'm just playing, and I'm not saying like I would just go through the motions, it would just have to be something different. Like, if you told me, hey, let's go speak on horror movies, and I'm like, okay. And I say about
mhm.
10 movies, and that's because that's my experience with horror movies. I'm not a big horror movie person. But if you put me and you said, hey, have a presentation on basketball or have a presentation on living your life to the fullest every day, yeah, I want to be way more passionate about it because I have living experience of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. Because I feel like, on this podcast, like, I think when I'm talking to people like this, I'm comfortable. I can really take an idea and sort of explore it and sort of go down different rabbit holes. But the moment that I try to follow a script, or the moment that I try to like say something precise or remember like to, what I was going to say or whatever, like the moment I try to do that, it's like, logic just seems to go out the window. You know what I mean? Like, right now I
Yeah.
can talk to you, we can talk, we can kind of go in open different directions, but trying to follow a script is really is difficult for me. And I think that brings us back to, to tie in the integrity piece of this, is sort of because, I think we all know when we're trying to do something that's maybe not us. And it just
Yeah.
takes it takes a lot of just effort and willpower to make that work. And I guess the question would be, is that sustainable, for you to do? But yeah, anyway, I just see, I see what you're saying, and I've heard that's the reason I asked, because I heard this from different people, and it seems to be a lot in the speaking space. Like a lot of people who speak, they say that, hey, when I tell my story, it's like I'm passionate, I'm fueled by this thing. If I were to talk about something completely different, I'd be like, what it was called, stage fright or whatever. So that's why I was asking.
No, there's a lot of people who have to face that stage fright. I mean, I play basketball in front of thousands of people. Like, I'm
Yeah.
around people and I realize how to compartmentalize it to be like, okay, these are just people. They're here for an experience, and I just so happen to deliver the experience. For what I would say for you about the script or unscripted, someone else's plan for you. I'll say that again. It's someone else's plan for you. It's their blueprint. Hey, if you're going to do a podcast, you got to say this, 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 this. Or that works for them. That's perfect. Hey, guess what? Buddy, enjoy. That's a great way to do your podcast. Don't tell me how to do mine. That's the same thing with you, Cody. And that's also our, we could say, rebellious nature, but also it's just, you're Cody. You run things differently. This is Cody's podcast, and it's ran the way that you want to run it. And I think the problem is you get people who think they're so-called experts and they want to tell you how to do your own stuff. And it's kind of like the teacher that told you how to write your name. Like, how are you going to sign your name? Well, you need to do certain things, right? That's, but as far as like the creative stuff, you can't tell a creative person how to do something.
Yeah,
It's just,
no,
it
for
doesn't
sure.
work. Yeah.
And I think,
So that's what I'm saying.
I think that's one thing too that I think about, and I've had these conversations with people in here too. Like if we're having this conversation, you and I, we can have similar conversations. Maybe I probably have had similar conversations as far as my contribution to this goes on this podcast. But like who we have, like you and I having this conversation, is really only going to ever happen between us. Like this conversation is never, it doesn't matter who we talk to. Again, this specific conversation in this way, like with everything that we're thinking about, talking about, it's only going to happen with us. And if we were to have this conversation again, if we didn't try to have the same exact conversation, we'd have a different conversation. You know what I mean? So it's like, to me, it's like, and I use this a lot to sort of try to inspire and motivate people, but whatever it is, whether it's this conversation or that business or that goal or whatever, if you're passionate about that thing, you are probably the only person who can bring that to reality and offer that to the world. Because yes, there's like a bunch of people in the same industries, the same careers. I get that. But all those people are different. Like they are bringing themselves to that specific role, to that specific job, or to that specific, passion, whatever it is. And I think that's really important for people to think about.
Yeah. I mean, so I look at it as a lesson. I like to take something from this person, this person, to this person, and then be like, okay, it's kind of like if I'm cooking something and I wanted to create something. I'm not a good cook, but my point is I would take different ingredients to see what I like. And I think that's also being open-minded to things, to realize, hey, I don't know yet how to do something, yet I'm learning, and learning, you're going to make, quote unquote, what people would say, mistakes, right? But those are just lessons. I mean, I don't know how many times I've made mistakes cooking eggs, right? But I mean, I can make some good scrambled eggs if I want to now. But when I was a kid and I was burning them and all that stuff, like, I mean, yeah, maybe I had to remake them. But the point is like there's a learning process, and we have to be mindful of that learning process. And whether that's in sports, if that's in physical fitness, if that's in business, we have to realize we have to be able to ask for grace. I'm a big believer in grace. And when I say grace, I don't mean just grace for me. I'm saying grace for everybody. So, with the police shooting, I don't have any ill will toward that. Same thing with the doctors that misdiagnosed me. It was the seventh doctor that told me I was misdiagnosed. There was 6 other doctors that said I was. I believe in grace so much that I give grace because I want grace. I believe in, if you want something, you have to be able to give that to others. If you were in that situation, again, it's that integrity part that it's just, that's how I feel. I feel like if I want grace, I have to give grace, and it should be given just as much as it should be received.
I like that, man. Excuse me. Before we close, I do have to close here. Hang on just a second. So before we close, I do have to close in just a couple minutes. I wanted to ask you about like the actual, like the athletic sports part of like basketball. So you were saying you were playing internationally?
Yeah, so I played internationally. I didn't play my last 2 years of high school. Like, I had just this really crazy path. I was ready for opportunity, and the opportunity struck.
So what does that mean? Like when you say international, like I know what international, but like, did you go to games internationally, or you went to tournaments? What does that mean?
Oh, okay. So when I did it, it was 4 years after the dream team, like the original dream team. So global basketball was like exploding. People wanted to know as much about it as possible. And for me, like, God just opened up a door, man, and it allowed me to get on a mission trip. And through that part with the mission trip, I came back with an agent, and the agent was like, "I like you. I like your athletic ability. I like the fact that you're always on the offensive mindset. You have an offensive mindset." He's like, most people, they want to play 2 ways or play both. He's like, when you get the ball, you're looking to score. He was like, I like that. I like the fact that you're athletic. And he was like, you're young. And so he was like, I really like you. I feel like you don't even know how good you are. This is the point. That's what he would say. And so he made me believe in myself. And so one of the things is I was underweight. And so but how that worked was I went on a mission trip, man. That was it. Like, it was a thing where I felt like God told me to be prepared, and I was prepared. The opportunity struck. I took it. I ran with it. And then when I came back, I was in the process of getting my body where it needed to be to actually be an international basketball player, like a professional international basketball player. So never been professional, never signed a pro contract yet. And in doing that, I actually got into one of my, I'll say it's one of the moments of where my ego took over. And that's also why I kind of keep my ego to the side and about every project I do, is because I learned a very valuable lesson that day. And ended up getting hurt, and ended up having to have knee surgery, and ended up the knee surgery wasn't done correctly. So it was a bad knee surgery, but it also was the first challenge that I faced. And then also I felt like I hit my ceiling, or it was close enough to my ceiling, that I just was done with it. Once I found out that if I kept playing the way I was doing, there had been some injuries that I just pushed through, and I shouldn't have. I should have had surgery before. And that's what really kind of caused the issue. And she was like, hey, if you keep doing this, she's like, and most people will, she's like, you have 3 to 5 year window. And she's like, and then in your 30s, you're going to have your knee replaced. And I just didn't feel like that was the direction I wanted to go. I saw myself being a sports psychologist. And so that was where I was like, okay, my career is over, and I'm willing to look into that direction. And that's really the basketball part. And by doing that, I was just aligned myself with a lot of really great basketball players, basketball minds, NCAA basketball coaches that are in the Basketball Hall of Fame and stuff. Like, I just have these great relationships. So that's really the basketball part, man. And, one of the things that I did immediately was I went and found kids that I felt like were getting overlooked. And I helped coach mental performance with those kids, because I knew how I was and how I was overlooked.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of the reason I was asking, is just kind of get an understanding of it, because man, basketball is like a really physically demanding sport, and I don't like, because you're like I didn't really play basketball like that. And I don't really watch basketball, but I know that there's a lot of the cardiovascular fitness is got to be insane because those guys are constantly running back and forth. It's kind of like soccer. Like those guys are all over the place. Whereas football and maybe basketball's like this. I don't know. Football, if you're on defense, you have sort of a break when offense gets back on. Whatever it is. Baseball is kind of like maybe there's a break or whatever. But it's just like it seems like basketball and soccer. Those guys are all over the place constantly.
There's a lot of running. I mean, and I love to run. I mean, that was one of the things that I actually really enjoyed was the running and the preparation part of it because I love to run every day. And as a kid, I always was like, I want to run. And yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, man. It was like to be that close to actually being a professional basketball player is, I don't like to say it as a regret. It's just one of those things where, man, what would have happened? But then, also, Cody, I realized that was never supposed to be what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to do what I'm doing right now, and that is inspiring others. And I really took off that hat at the end of 2025. I realized that like I love basketball, but it didn't love me back the way I love basketball. And what I realized was my true destiny was to be a speaker and to help others, not be a basketball player. If the basketball player would have been meant to be like, I would have had to like really, really like figure a way to get in, if that makes sense. Like just, I felt like I forced it. I was forcing it, force. Where,
Right.
in the end of 2025, I actually just I gave up the basketball player identity. I say this I'm a former international basketball player to tell people that I accomplished my dream because guess what? There's not very many people that ever accomplish their dream. And I want people to know that that is still true. I want to be on stages and inspire kids to say, hey, I know your teacher says you can't accomplish your dream, but guess what? She's wrong. Because guess what? I did it. And I want to inspire you to do whatever you want to do and be, if you want to be a musician, like it's possible. Is the probability like super high? Probably not, but you can still do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of the thing, man, about when so I believe in God. I believe there's a higher power. People may not, and that's okay. But when we ask this higher power, or we ask the universe, or we ask the higher version of ourselves, whatever it happens to be for this person, when we ask this thing for the life that we want, a lot of times that requires who we are. It requires losing who we are to become who we need to be to have the thing that we want. And I think a lot of times that's that sort of loss is like the painful part of it. But the analogy here would be like a butterfly has to go through that process or the caterpillar has to go through that process to become the butterfly, and I think that's sort of that initial sort of pain, I think, is what keeps a lot of people from really sort of, I don't want to say chasing, pursuing and catching that dream.
Yes, absolutely. It's what I said about the laziness thing. It's about how much work to get the results. How much work am I willing to do to get the results? If I don't feel the results are worth all this work, then I'm not going to do it. Like that's what most people's mindset is. Where it's not, I want this really bad. Like, how bad do you want it? I mean, Eric Thomas talks about how bad you want to breathe. Like, right? Like, I want to breathe pretty bad. So, I mean, it's also very necessary. It's necessary. So, therefore, if I want my dream like that, like, and that's the way I am with speaking. I want to get better. I want to be better. But also, like, my podcast, I want to have a better podcast. I want to be a better podcast host. I want to be a better podcast guest because I feel like the lessons that I have to teach other people, they're not going to get from other people, from this lived experience. Like, there's not, I can put myself in a room pretty quick, pretty quick. And so I know that for that lesson, it's got to come from me right now. And I hope that no one else has to go through that misdiagnosis of 18 and a half years and it only being something very minimal like sleep apnea, and something that could be taken care of in 2 weeks or 2 months. The same thing with the shooting. Like, I don't want anyone to have to go through that near-death experience and have to have those type of things. But I want you to understand that I have a lesson to share, that you don't have to go through those things to accept the lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I do appreciate that, man. I appreciate, you sharing that today and being here. I do have to close, but before I close, I ask everybody a similar question. If you could share one of the most important lessons you've ever learned, this can be from your experience, your career, anything that you want to share that you maybe a personal experience, if you're comfortable sharing it. This sort of helps fit with the theme of wisdom, which the name of the podcast is Pure Wisdom. So, if you could share one of the most important lessons you've ever learned, what do you think that would be?
I feel like nothing is given. Like nothing is given. Live this day like it's your last day every day. And I did that the last year and like half. Every day is so much more magical than the day before. And when you're able to take life like that, you understand the purpose of life. You understand the purpose of who you are, but also the impact that you can bring to others. It's the most amazing feeling in the world, man, is when I know I can get through the day, and then I'm like, that's an incredible day. I can't wait to do it tomorrow, but guess what? Tomorrow's going to be better than today because I know today was better than yesterday. And that's the way I would tell people to live. Live like your heart is on fire.
No, yeah, I like that. Before we close, do you have a website, social media, anything? Do you have a way people can contact you?
Yeah, so show up to win with the number 2.com is my community and coaching community. And then DwayneMorton.com is where you'll find me in the podcast. And then I'm show up to win for podcasting. And so I have 2 podcasts. One is just I'm spotlighting others' resilience stories. And then I started one. It's called Show Up to Win, The Journey. And that is the journey to how I became to show up to win. And that just started a little bit right before the first of the year.
Okay. Yeah. And if you'll send that to me, I'll put it, it'll be in the link, in the descriptions. But I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you having here. Appreciate your insight and your time today. I'm going to stop the video. If you can hang out just for a second, I'll explain the upload situation to you, but I do appreciate your time.
Thanks, Cody. I appreciate it.
Hey everybody, listen, I really appreciate you guys tuning in today, man. If you like the content, if you found this episode useful, you can visit us on social media. That's YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, Amazon Music, Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, and Google and Apple Podcasts. There you can like our videos, follow, subscribe, and share. And again, we appreciate it. We'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by Excel Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@excelcoaching.academy.